Let's make the sexiest possible crochet dinosaur here. Ooh. Oh. When I was young, Triceratops was my favorite dinosaur. And I think that's because there were lots of pictures of a lone animal in the woods pitted off against a giant T-Rex that should be reaching over the top trying to bite past this big shield, and the Triceratops would stick it in the belly and drive it off. It was a real underdog story. But then I learned, as I got older, there's no way that a T-Rex would ever attempt a frontal assault. So this leads me to a question. If the shield, or more accurately known, the frill, was not being used for defense, what was it being used for? Fortunately, my colleague Dave Hone is a world-leading paleontologist at Queen Mary University, London. And if he can't help the two of us answer this question, then nobody can. So we're off to see him now, aren't we? Dave!
What have you got?
Oh, dinosaur, clearly!
Oh, sorry. It was fluffier than I remembered.
Okay, so I'm interested in dinosaurs from a few different points of view. There's so much variation in dinosaurs, shape, size, etc., and even parts on their bodies. And some of it may be down to what they hunt, to what they can try to hide from, to different places that they live. What do you know about that?
Quite a lot.
Turns out,
it's something I've worked
you the
on.
man.
Yes. So yeah, there's all manner of frills and crests and spines and similar things, and indeed to a degree the horns and spikes and stuff like this as well, across loads of different dinosaur groups, and it's long been a subject of discussion and speculation about quite what they were. And one of the major ones has always been some kind of sexual signal.
What Dave is talking about here is how an animal attracts a mate. It might not be the first thing you think of when considering a Triceratops frill, but successfully mating and producing offspring is just as important as fighting off predators. But what does an attractive dinosaur actually look like? So the crest may not have looked exactly like this.
Similar, but yeah.
I want you to help me tart this up a little bit. Let's make the sexiest possible crochet dinosaur here. I've brought some more material, and I've got some fail-proof Scotch tape.
Oh, this will work fine, I'm sure.
Do we have any reason to suspect, first of all, that there might be a certain coloration in the crest that we can start with?
Nothing specific, but certainly I would be very surprised if many of the animals, and ceratopsians, Triceratops and their relatives, particularly good example, I'd be very surprised if these frills weren't either brightly colored or brightly patterned.
And that's because we see a similar thing today in animals that are showing off each other?
Yeah, generally.
If the frill is there
if you're trying to show off, you want to show off. A huge number of these were living in herds. Now, if you're already living in a herd of a couple of hundred, potentially even a couple of thousand animals that are 3 or 4 tons each, probably can't really hide.
Okay.
So you don't really have anything to lose by then being bright as well.
You're the expert. You take it
course.
away. Okay, so we're decorating this with possible color patterns,
Yeah.
and it's on the frill, but I guess I haven't established yet, is the frill thought to actually be sexual selection? I mean, couldn't it just be a protection, right? So if you've got some kind of carnotaur...
You had a furry T-Rex there a second ago.
Oh!
There we go.
Sweet, okay,
Perfect.
so wouldn't this just protect the neck? Couldn't we just think of it as that?
We could, but it's a pretty poor idea. So first of all, with a couple of Triceratops is actually very unusual in the sense that its frill is solid and all the others are hollow. These enormous holes in them. So it's not going to act as very much protection if you're basically more whole than bone.
It turns out there are loads of different frilled Ceratops-type dinosaurs. And they all have different types of frills, like Torosaurus, which had large areas that actually lacked bone. Okay, so it's just meant to be light and big.
Yeah.
Okay.
And even Triceratops, its frill is thinner than the bone we know that T-Rex can bite through.
Okay.
So it's not really armor if you know the thing it's protecting you from, it doesn't protect you from.
Okay.
Plus, it only really protects your neck.
Okay.
And mostly these things are being attacked from the rear.
Right. This isn't Ankylosaurus with lots of
Right. You want
tough
to, yeah,
stuff.
you want to cover the whole damn animal if you're
Okay.
if you're really trying to stop that.
Plus, it's right up near the horn. So if T-Rex is going to attack, it's not going to be on the business end.
Yeah,
it's going to try to come around or flip it over.
Precisely.
Okay.
So it's not for protection. One of the other hypotheses that was put out there is this is to do with temperature regulation.
Okay.
But there's no correlation between how hot it was or how big the animal was and how big its frill
so
was.
if it were temperature, you'd expect to see something with the places it lived and the temperatures we thought, and some kind of
a bigger animal in a hotter environment is going to need more area to lose the heat.
Okay.
We've got them in the Arctic with big frills.
Okay.
We've got them in the desert with small frills and everything in between.
So we have evidence against Triceratops frills being used for protection or temperature regulation. This leaves sexual selection as a possibility, but I don't want this to simply be a default option. I want some good evidence in support of this idea. Can we actually find this?
The other big one is growth. Something that's sexually selected, or a feature that's associated with social dominance, is something that's only of use to an animal that's reproducing.
Okay.
It's got to be sexually mature, which means it's got to be quite big. And we see that the easiest way to look at that is to think of sheep and cows.
All right.
You look at a half-grown bullock, a cow that's already, shoulder high to a human. They have knobby little horns.
Because they don't need them yet. They're not trying to attract
they're
any
just starting to grow. And then in a couple of years, boom, you've got that classic bull, huge amount of horn. It grows really, really fast just when they need it. They've got past the age of, I need to grow, I need to avoid being killed, and now it's time to pass my genetic material on, I need the equipment.
Okay.
And they stop growing and they switch everything to this. And we see the same pattern in ceratopsians. So there's a little dinosaur called Triceratops from Mongolia I worked on.
Okay.
Triceratops is a fraction of the size.
When you say little, are we talking knee-high to a grasshopper?
A sheep.
A sheep, okay.
Yeah,
Wait, a
plus
Triceratops-like sheep
Yeah.
size.
Plus tail.
That's cute.
With
All
a
right.
frill but no horns.
Oh,
With
okay.
that fundamental body plan.
So it's got a frill, which this would imply that even though it's small, it's an adult because it's reached sexual maturity.
But this is the fun thing. We have everything from just hatched, incredibly young babies, all the way up to big adults. And what you see is, and this is some work I did here, you can basically plot a little graph of how big the animal is and how big its frill is. And the frill trundles along, not getting bigger for a long time, and then whoop,
like the bullhorn.
it suddenly gets big.
It's great that we have so many fossils of Protoceratops because we can connect all the dots onto a graph. And what we see is that when the body size is small, the frill size grows right along with the body. But when they reach a certain point that we assume to be puberty, suddenly the frill size grows immensely relative to the body size. And then it stays large as the animal continues on through adulthood.
And this is the big thing. In almost all of these, we see them in every specimen that we have, which implies that it's going to be in both sexes.
When I think of sexual selection, I often think of the difference between the male and female. Maybe I'm just thinking from a mammal point of view.
No, it's,
right?
it's very common, lots and lots of birds, peacocks being the most obvious example. And there's another phenomenon or a version of sexual selection called mutual sexual selection, where both males and females have ornamentation.
The same ornamentation?
Yeah, and usually to the same degree. So a classic example is the black swan. So those lovely Australian swans that are jet black with a little red beak. Mm-hmm. They have these really strange curly feathers on the tips of their wings.
Okay, yes.
And what we find is that females prefer curlier winged males, but males also prefer curlier winged females. And whoever's got the curliest wings tends to be the dominant member of the group.
Wouldn't that lead to some kind of crazy super curly wings in just a few generations?
You can only go so far.
Before you can't fly anymore.
Well, right, and that's the thing. In their case, it affects their flying ability. In the case of these, they're lugging huge amounts of bone on the top of their head, which is a billboard for predators.
Okay.
You can only go so far. There is a trade-off. You have only so much energy you can invest. And this is why we think of these things as being what biologists would call an honest signal.
Okay.
You can't cheat. I as a Triceratops, if I'm a particularly sickly one who's not doing very well, I simply can't grow a twice as big frill with twice as bright colors as the healthy guy. I can't. And he has that giant frill with the brightest colors because he is the biggest, healthiest one.
Got it.
And that's what it comes down to. But yeah, mutual sexual selection, it's an idea that even Darwin was writing about.
Okay.
And it's this, fairly fundamental phenomenon. If both of you are putting lots of effort into rearing your offspring, both of you want to make sure you have a partner that's good and healthy.
Okay. Makes sense.
And so both of you end up with big frills and signals.
It turns out that it does appear that it was for sexually selective purposes and that it wasn't necessarily for protection, because this wouldn't work.
It's pretty reasonable to infer that, socio-sexual selection is what's driving these and the big sail in Spinosaurus and the dome heads in the pachycephalosaurs and potentially even things like the armor and ankylosaurs.
Oh, really? Wow. So while we've always known dinosaurs are cool, what you may have learned now is that they're also sexy. I came into this with a question. What is the giant frill for on Triceratops? And I think Dave Hone has given me a good answer. Turns out that we have a huge range of fossils from an animal closely related to Triceratops. And as these get bigger and get just past the juvenile stage, the frill really explodes in size. So this suggests that it's sexual selection. What's interesting is that that occurs in both males and females, which suggests that it's just advertising the health of the individual, a bigger frill meaning a healthier animal and a potentially better parent. So now we know that Triceratops is not only really friggin' cool, it's also really sexy. Until next time, remember that between the question and the answer are all of the really tasty bits. Anything else you want in there?
It's just a cold shower is what we need at the moment, I think.
You get Barry White to want to do. What about me? Aren't I sexy? No, you're just tripadelic, man, with those stripes. What's going on there? Oh, peas. I suck at this.